Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a totally fascinating breakdown of exactly why truth unmakes for village. We're looking at a story where magic, math, and deeply repressed desires collide in a spectacular and, honestly, pretty chaotic fashion. It's about how a single alchemical elixir completely unmade an entire Edwardian society. I want to kick things off immediately with this incredibly jarring confession. Just picture this for a second. You've got the town's highly respected mayor standing out in a foggy village square, literally screaming his hidden truth into a violet bonfire. I craved silk while preaching the virtues of starched collars. I mean, wow. This isn't just a simple political scandal, right? It's the complete psychological collapse of a man who spent 20 solid years enforcing a rigid morality that he privately despised. But how on earth did he get there? Well, that brings us to the core question we're tackling today. What happens when an entire repressed society is suddenly forced to just speak the truth? We're going to explore this wild collision of magic and intense Edwardian repression in the village of Wormwood on the Mire. Basically, we're asking, what happens when the carefully constructed lies that hold a community together are stripped away overnight? Section 1. The illusion of order. To really understand the collapse, we have to look at the village's rigid starting point before the Blackwood sisters showed up. The contrast is just absolutely stark. Before the magic hit, the village was this bleak, monochromatic tableau. You know, the blacksmith, the vicar, the housewives, they all moved through these identical, flavorless days, entirely governed by rigid decorum and deeply buried desires. But after, it's like a totally different world. It became a place awash in glowing violet magic, with public confessions happening right in the taverns, and this radical, almost terrifying sense of social liberation. Section 2. Bottling the truth. So, what was the spark that actually ignited this whole powder keg? Enter Beatrice, Elspeth, and Ivy Blackwood. These three witches, who, by the way, view magic not as some mystical woo-woo, but as precise mathematics and structural engineering, decide that they are going to commercialize honesty. And right at the center of their plan is an ancient artifact, the corset of truth. This isn't just a piece of clothing. It's a magical garment with a carved whalebone spine, covered in microscopic subsonic runes. It literally consumes light. It hungers to squeeze honesty out of recalcitrant lungs. When someone tells a lie nearby, the corset hums, and its laces physically tighten all on their own. Now, the Blackwood sisters didn't just make people wear this thing, they weaponized it. Beatrice and Elspeth broke the magic down through exact alchemical processes. It's like a structural equation. Step 1, you pluck a silver thread from the humming corset. Step 2, steep that thread in gin, which allows the enchantment to bleed out. And step 3, you stabilize the molecular bonds with elderberry. The results? This shimmering, violet liquid that smells faintly of jasmine and ozone. But here's the catch. You can't exactly sell a magical truth serum to a deeply religious, repressed village, right? So they bypassed the vicar's outrage by using a beautiful lie as a vessel to deliver an ugly truth. They brilliantly labeled it Madame Blackwood's Tonic for Female Vigor and Pale Complexions, priced it at a very reasonable 4 shillings a pop, and took it to the market. Unsurprisingly, it was an instant hit. Section 3. The Epidemic of Honesty. The village's visceral reaction was almost immediate. The breaches in decorum escalated incredibly fast. First, Mrs. Higgins, the blacksmith's wife, drinks the tonic right out in the street. Instantly, her posture shifts. Her spine violently arches into a rigid Edwardian S-bend, which is the exact silhouette the corset of truth demands. Suddenly, housewives across the village are speaking in highly colorful metaphors and taking very suspicious afternoon naps. The local tavern literally transforms into an open confessional, with the air so thick with static electricity as women just openly declare their deepest resentments. And then, strangest of all, this pulsing violet residue begins creeping across the village ceilings and beams, seemingly feeding on all these confessions. Section 4. Birth of the homunculus. Because, as it turns out, the magic wasn't just changing behavior. It was building something entirely new. This is where it gets wild. We can actually map the exponential growth of this creature through a bizarre and honestly highly scandalous trail of displaced undergarments. On Tuesday morning, silk drawers vanish from a clothesline. Wednesday night, a chemise is left sitting on a blacksmith's anvil. Later that week, the vicar's surplice and Elspeth's bloomers end up tied to the church weather vane. The sisters realize these aren't random pranks. They form a precise geometric pattern across the village, mapping the repressed connections of the townspeople. Ultimately, this trail leads straight to a dark cellar where a massive nest of stolen silk has been woven together, pulsing with that exact same violet alchemical light. And that is where we meet Silas, the homunculus. Now, Silas wasn't just some random monster. He was the literal, sentient manifestation of the village's collective repressed hunger, birthed directly from the magic residue of the elixir and those stolen intimate garments. He was essentially a living feedback loop. Think about it. The elixir forced the villagers to confess their truths. Silas fed on the energy of that honesty to build his physical form. And as he grew stronger, his presence amplified the tonic's effects across the entire town. Section 5. The Great Awakening. This massive feedback loop brings us to the explosive climax where the village's structural lies completely and irreversibly collapse. If we look at the ancient Blackwood grimoire, we can see exactly how Silas executed his grand design. He hijacked the village's sacred spaces using pure magic mechanics. He utilized acoustic amplification, ringing the church bell to send out sound waves that broadcast the corset's truth-extracting influence to literally every woman who had tasted the elixir. And he combined that with sacrificium sacratus, using the rigid, unwavering faith of the vicar and the church as a spiritual lightning rod. This triggered what the grimoire ominously calls the Great Awakening. The scene that followed was terrifying and ecstatic. The village green turned into an absolute hive mind. Picture 100 villagers swaying around a violet bonfire, physically connected by glowing threads of magical silk extending directly from Silas. Agatha, the vicar's wife, is floating above the crowd, her corset physically crushing her as she screams out all the town's hypocrisies. And there's Mayor Finch, dressed in his wife's silk undergarments, leading a synchronized mass confession. In a single night, the entire social order of Wormwood on the Mire was completely, utterly unmade. Section 6. The Village Remade. So, what exactly happens the morning after the apocalypse of truth? Well, this is the absolute crucial point for us to take away. The village wasn't destroyed at all. It was just radically reorganized. Look at the aftermath. Mrs. Higgins, formerly this miserable, silent wife, converts the old mill into a highly successful brothel called the Velvet Hammer. Father Thomas, the famously rigid vicar, abandons his dogma entirely to become a quote-unquote spiritual advisor down in Cornwall, teaching ecstasy instead of repression. Agatha Vaughn refuses to go back to her old life and moves in with the Blackwoods. Those monochromatic, flavorless cages are just gone. It kind of makes you wonder about your own social circles, doesn't it? If every hidden truth suddenly came to light, what new structures would take the place of the old ones? The next morning, Elspeth Blackwood sits in her kitchen, drinking gin, and looking out at the chaotic, glorious mess they've made of the town. And she comes to this euphoric realization. We freed them. Despite the terror and the chaos and, the giant undergarment monsters, their magical intervention actually liberated the villagers from cages of their own making. Which leaves us with this final profound thought to ponder. When a society is entirely built on a foundation of hypocrisy, enforced silence, and repressed desires, is the unmaking of that society actually a tragedy, or is it a triumph? Did the absolute truth destroy Wormwood on the Mire, or did it simply cure it of its lies? I really hope this explainer gave you a lot to think about today. Until next time, keep questioning the structures around you.